Animation. Animation is everywhere, even when you don't realize it. Whether you're watching a movie, a cartoon,
What's up, Doc?
playing a game, you see it pretty much every day. It's a form of art, and it's part of our culture, so that means it's part of our lives. But how did it get there? Animation is best known as the process of drawing each and every little movement and putting them together one after another until it appears it's moving. It is a long and grueling task, as hundreds of frames have to be drawn for someone to so much as blink. People would eventually discover easier solutions to get around these difficulties, though. These artists would set the scene on the start to animation. Before animation was what we know it as today, it wasn't really a way to tell stories. It was more of a fancy party trick. Peter-Marc Roget came up with the concept in his book, Persistence of Motion with Regard to Moving Objects. In it, Roget describes how streaming objects together could create the illusion of motion. Sound familiar? This was only the start, and he didn't say how that would be possible or how these images could be used, but lucky for him, Joseph Plateau came up with the phenakitoscope. It was a disc with images on the rim. When spun in front of a mirror, the images appeared to move. William Horner made a serious upgrade 2 years later with the zoetrope. The Praximascope, invented by Charles-Émile Renard, was basically the zoetrope with spinning and mirrors. Flip books also became a thing, but I'm pretty sure you know what those are. Okay, so we've established that inventors were thinking about making pictures move. But when did that translate into animation? The answer was in 1892. Remember Renard? Well, he had another trick up his sleeve by making Pauvre Pierrot, the first cartoon. He did this by using a fancy praxinoscope and a projector. So, no hand-drawn stuff yet, but Renard showed this wasn't just a party trick. Thanks, dude. The first animation produced on film was a short little cartoon called The Humorous Phases of Funny Faces. So, still no hand-drawn animation, as this cartoon was produced using stop-motion photography. Some studios like Leica still use that method to produce films today. Finally, 2 years after Funny Faces, Phantasmagoria, the first hand-drawn animated film, was produced in 1908. Also in 1908, Gertie the Dinosaur, the first likable and recognizable cartoon character, was created. 1908 was a good year for animation. By 1919, film studios began to develop, and animation studios were right beside them. Like live-action films, cartoons were silent and in black and white. But they weren't full-length movies in America yet. At this time, cartoon shorts were shown before and after full-length motion pictures. Like Pixar, Felix the Cat was perhaps the most well-known of these cartoon characters. The next big step for animation occurred alongside film, sound. The first animated cartoon with sound was Steamboat Willie, produced by Walt Disney in 1928. Cartoons gained color in 1932 with Disney's short, Flowers and Trees. It was a lot less expensive for cartoons to have color than live action, so that meant for a long time, shorts playing before your movie would have color, while the movie usually wouldn't. Despite the stock market crash of 1929, 1930 was the beginning of the golden age of animation. While Snow White was the big deal as the first American hand-drawn, feature-length film, it was mostly due to these shorts. Note the emphasis on American. The first feature-length animated movie was The Adventures of Prince Ahmed. It was released in 1926 and came to America in 1932, as was a German film. Snow White was released in 1937. The Adventures of Prince Ahmed used silhouettes and was created by Lotte Reiniger. Snow White was actually the 9th animated feature-length film. However, that isn't to say that Snow White wasn't a game changer, because it absolutely was. Not only because of the cultural impact in America, but because of Walt's
multiplane camera.
The camera had multiple layers that allow for images to be animated on said different layers. That meant the camera could move around the shots, and it allowed the backgrounds to have more depth.
Farthest away from the camera. With our original picture broke, same moonlight scene, the way the multiplane camera sees it. As you can see, we finally got the moon to keep its proper distance.
Snow White also used an older piece of tech, the rotoscope. The rotoscope is basically a device to let animators trace a person's movements so the cartoon could look more realistic. People don't use it anymore, but it was a huge boost for early animators until they could figure out how to draw realistic movements without it. Cell animation was another tool of early animators. Animators would paint each frame on a clear sheet, so the images could be transferred to a background. After Snow White, the landscape changed. Now American audiences were ready for animated movies. In the 1950s, TV slowly took over America. Film now had a new outlet, and by extension, so did animation. But it wasn't until 1962 that the first animated TV show, The Flintstones, came into being. Now you know how we got from this to this. From that, animation has developed into something that is deeply entrenched into our culture, but that could be its own video.
It's kinda low to stab a man in the